For anyone not familiar with this project, the KISS won a Gold Leaf Award from the Foil and Special Effects Association this year. It includes 12 layers of sleeking foil, printable laminate, 5 inks, and the last tattered shreds of my sanity. Here's how we made it. The KISS actually started life as a simple 4-color print designed by Meg Kirkpatrick. It's a protest piece recontextualizing the 1918 Gustav Klimt painting to reflect the power dynamic in a post-Roe v. Wade America. We liked the concept, and I was curious if it would be possible to convert the background text, the complete legal ruling overturning the Dobbs decision, into foil. Meg was on board and provided a new file allowing us to try it. It worked. And then I got to talking with her, and the moment she told me the original painting includes gold, silver, and platinum leaf, I had a terrible idea. That kicked off 6 months of file prep, experimentation, and beating my head against the sleeking foiler until it had submitted to me. We ran into problems. First, Meg, to our mutual horror, had accidentally flattened the original Procreate file and lost the backups in a hard drive crash. We had to reverse engineer the entire thing in Photoshop with extensive use of content-aware fill and duplicate layers. I won't even try to estimate how long that took. Speaking of layers, it turns out the order of the foil matters a lot. The foil needed to be laid down in a very specific sequence. Some colors stick to others stick to everything, and still others stick to nothing but the ink. That took another month to iron out. The silver and gold foil is directly printable. I wanted it to take a step further and to include a third foil in the background. That required adding a layer of sapphire coating, a UV-cured primer that improves ink adhesion. The text was raster out of Procreate. We wanted to go smaller, and that meant we needed it to be vector. So I rebuilt the background. We now had half the file in Photoshop, half the file in Illustrator, and there were so many layers that we didn't even dare try to combine them. Right around then, HP debuted yellow UV-reactive ink. As soon as I got my hands on it, I reached out to Meg. In for a penny, in for a pound of plutonium, right? It's always nice when I meet a client who's operating on the same wavelength of crazy, because a few days later, she delivered an entirely new layer of artwork that recontextualized the entire print under blacklight. And we still had to produce it. Here's how that looked. We split the production into 3 phases: substrate prep, printing, and foiling. I picked Tango 18-point C2S as the backer. I needed something extremely stable. This turned out to be a mistake. The material is already thick, and once you've shoved it through a printing press and a laminator a few times, it gets even thicker as the water content evaporates. Thick enough that it exceeds the press specifications and jams. Constantly. The first few passes were easy. We printed the back of the sheet in black, then the front in gold, silver, and rose gold foil. These can be stacked with no trouble because the first 2 are printable. The third is not, so the press sheet needed to take a trip through the UV coater for an application of the primer that I mentioned. Then the sheets went back into the press and we put down the CMYK and UV-reactive ink. Our press has 7 ink stations, so this only took 1 pass. From there, we added a layer of printable soft-touch laminate. And then the hard part started. In total, there are 7 layers of foil on top of the laminate, each of which needed to be perfectly aligned with the ones below. And that's hard enough. Each subsequent print pass had a few casualties. Printable laminate likes to generate static, so the sheets like to stick and slow down inside the machine, and a fraction of a second matters when you're putting ink on paper. The big mistake that I made happened here. That foiling order I mentioned, matte foils need to precede metallic foils, and because I foolishly picked copper for the text accents, I needed to line up the entire background around those few tiny words. It did not go well. I actually wound up printing the accent words over themselves again because there wasn't enough ink to properly take the foil on the first try, and I was 4 hours into the production run at that point. If you look closely, you'll see some double vision in many of these prints, and those were the good ones. In all, around 12 hours of production were required for the 60 sheets, most of it spent troubleshooting and clearing jams. In the end, about 1 in every 4 press sheets survived quality control. By now it should be obvious that this was never intended to be a production-ready job. Think of this as the printing equivalent of a concept car. We wanted to see how far sleeking foil could be pushed, to know what the practical limits are and where the process starts breaking down. And the answer is way before we finished production. We learned a huge amount about temperature control, paper behavior, and layering techniques, and I will be perfectly happy to never try this again. But we've seen some really cool projects come out of it, and I've met some great people, and I think that makes the insanity worth it.